Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for tonight's webinar on Flight Deck Tech, Episode 1, Electronic Flight Bags with Foreflight's Phil Inman. My name is John Collins, and I am the Manager of Aviation Safety Programs for the Air Safety Institute, and will be your host for this webinar. This is the first in a series of 3 webinars on the topic of Flight Deck Tech. By registering for this, you are also registered for the remaining episodes, which air on June 16th and also October 20th. You'll get reminder emails as we get closer to those dates. But first, a few things to make sure you have a good experience this evening. Please make sure you've muted your microphones and have your volume set. We won't be able to troubleshoot during the webinar, but oftentimes logging out and logging back in will usually solve the issues. And if you can join not on a mobile device, that makes it even easier for you to enjoy the webinar. Tonight's webinar does qualify for wings credit, and so if you signed up for the webinar with your FAAsafety.gov email address, you'll receive credit automatically to your wings account within 7 days. We'll be taking questions throughout the webinar, and we'll have several opportunities for questions and answers during it. So if you have a question, please submit it using the question feature on the webinar. Look for the question mark on your control panel, click on that, enter the question and submit it, and we'll either answer it on air, or I have actually a team of really good Foreflight customer support specialists that are standing by to answer really detailed questions. So I want to thank them first as we get ready to go into this, because I know they're probably going to get a good workout tonight, and I appreciate their being here and helping us out with that. Also, for those of you that use the AOPA Pilot Passport app on the AOPA mobile app, attending this webinar will earn you an ASI webinar badge and 1,000 points on the leaderboard. So, and also you can add ASI webinars to your ASI transcript. I'll have more on both of these features at the end of the webinar. And lastly, we are recording tonight's webinar, and it will be up on our website tomorrow at webinars.aopa.org. So joining me tonight is Mr. Phil Inman from Foreflight's Customer Success Team. Phil, welcome, and thanks for being here tonight. What's your background in aviation, and what do you have for us tonight?
Well, thank you again, John, and good evening, everybody. I'm coming to you live from the Woodlands, Texas, suburb north of Houston, and we are going to discuss electronic flight bags in the cockpit as part of the flight deck technology. My background is not aviation. I am a petroleum engineer by degree and spent 38 years in the oil and gas industry. A few years back, I retired from that. I was a private pilot at the time, and got turned on to Foreflight. They were looking for people to man or be part of the pilot support team, which was growing at the time. I applied and was accepted and have been working for them ever since. I'll mark 5 years with Foreflight next month, and it's just been an absolute kick. It's really enhanced my knowledge of aviation, all facets, things I never thought I'd get into. And so my family has kind of transformed from an oil and gas family to an aviation family. My son is an airline pilot. So we have a lot of kitchen table talk about flying and all sorts of stuff. It has a tendency to bore my wife a little bit, but nonetheless, it's great to be here. I hope that this is worth everybody's time, that you come away having learned a lot of things. And with that, John, we can get kicked off, unless you want to tell a little about yourself.
Well, in addition to being the Manager of Aviation Safety Programs, I'm also the Chief Flight Instructor for the Air Safety Institute. I've been a flight instructor since 1996, and I enjoy doing that. I haven't been an active instructor until recently. I have a single private pilot student, and we're getting her ready for her check ride here in a few weeks. So I'm hoping she's watching tonight and picking up some more tips that she can use when she goes and takes her ride. I've been flying since 1986, and I really enjoy it. I'm a commercial multi-engine instrument-rated pilot and a CFI II MEI. And I've been working for AOPA for 24 years. So it's been a lot of fun here, and I've really enjoyed it.
Excellent. Glad to hear that. I just fly Cessnas. I'm the success team that John mentioned actually deals mostly with business aviation, but I'm a GA pilot, as I think most of our attendees are, and I fly Cessna 172s, 182s out of David Wayne Hooks here in North Houston. Member of the Southwest Flying Club there. Kudos to all, and shout out to all my compadres that are attending on that. And with that, we'll get started. I think we have a lot of interesting stuff and hopefully enlighten a lot of people. Today's outline, as you can see, is we're going to cover four main themes. And I think you're going to see a lot of consistency with the way you approach every flight and both a mindset and in preparation. So we're going to add electronics to that, focusing on the electronic flight bag and specifically Foreflight, because that's my area of expertise. And we want you to think about the way you prepare for flights. So the first segment is going to be preparation. And then we're going to get into the cockpit and we're going to talk about external devices that are used to help take that Efb as being something more that sits on your knee or is mounted on a yoke. We're going to talk about tools that you use within Foreflight that are accessible to you while you are flying the aircraft, some of which maybe you've never seen before or you've never explored. And then, of course, and John can comment on this, post-flight briefings and debriefings are always important, whether you fly solo or with somebody or with an instructor. And Foreflight contributes to that and makes the debrief a much more valuable and useful tool. So those are the four main themes. We'll take a little break between each one as we transition to maybe field a question or two that's come in. So with that, let's just get right into preparation for flight. As we go through these, I want you all to think about two primary objectives that we all share every time we get near an airplane. And that is, especially now, we want to think about the proper use in being prepared to use technology as a tool to assist in our flight. Not only help us to control the airplane, but also for situational awareness. And they go hand in hand. Second of all, and I hear this repeatedly, and while a lot of people move to electronic flight bags, is the goal of eliminating paper. I think we all try to do that. We may not be successful in eliminating every piece of paper that take with you, but if we can cut it back, if we can do a lot of things electronically that used to be done on papers, not spreading out those big sectional and terminal charts in your lap and across your passenger's lap as well. Don't have plates flying all over the cockpit if the window's open, all that kind of stuff. I think everybody can relate. So those are our objectives here tonight. I was inspired 2 years ago, May, 2.5 years ago, almost 3, when I was giving a presentation at the AOPA Frederick fly-in, their anniversary fly-in. Immediately before that, Natalie with AOPA wrote an article that I want to give credit to because it inspired me. It should inspire you. Many of you probably read it. If not, you can go back and read it again. And the theme of the article was iPads are an essential piece of cockpit equipment. And she hit upon a lot of themes, a lot of mindsets, a lot of the preparation that we're talking about. So Natalie, I don't know if you're on or not listening, but you inspired us. And that was a little bit of the lead into what we're doing here tonight. Okay, let's get off into preparation. Let's just get right into it. First thing I want to talk about is I want you all to ask yourself a question. Could your electronic flight bag pass a check ride? Well, you know that electronic flight bags don't take check rides, but maybe they should, or maybe they should be scrutinized as much as any other activity when you take a check ride with an examiner or even a practice check ride with your CFI. You know, it's interesting. There are rigid compliance standards in almost all aspects of flying other than Part 91. Now, Part 91 has plenty of compliance standards. I'm not saying they don't. But if you are a 135 pilot, certainly when you get into 121 and some of the other aspects, or you go international and get into ICAO and things like that, there are rigid compliance standards. So we have it pretty easy, relatively wise, in Part 91. Why is that the case? You got to ask that. You got to ask that self your question. So as we ask that, I want to focus on 6 key questions, and you're going to see a lot of parallels in these questions with a lot of the training that you did for your for your flying and the training you do in preparation for every flight. So ask this in the context of your iPad. Is it powered up to maintain flight plus 45 minutes of reserve? I think everybody's seen the phrase 45 minutes of reserve, so I shouldn't have to explain that. You don't want your iPad dying in the middle of the flight or getting low battery signals when you're still up at altitude. Is your iPad up to date? Which means software version and data files. You know, if an examiner or you were ramp checked and they look at your plates and they look at your charts, if back in the paper days, and they're looking at the expiration dates, it's not really any different with electronics. There are active dates, there are active times that you have to pay attention to. We are obligated as pilots to have all available information for your flight. So do you have that electronically if you're dependent on your EFB? Is my EFB part of my pre-flight checklist? And we're going to come back to that here in just a minute. And the last two are maybe the most important. Am I comfortable and familiar with how to operate my EFB? At altitude is not the place to be figuring things out. You need to be comfortable. You need to be proficient. I would even advocate that you need to be intuitive with your iPad so that when you need to do something, you just start touching it and doing it and not thinking about what you're doing. And lastly, good pilots always have a backup plan for undesirable events that they're faced with. Do you have a backup plan for your EFB in the event that it were to fail? John, you've probably had countless flights with students and other pilots. You've probably encountered situations like this. I'm sure you could probably share stories that would occupy our entire time period surrounding these 6 items.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, if you're using an iPad or another tablet on a check ride, at some point that's probably going to become inoperative. And now what are you going to do? So hopefully you've got a backup, maybe a cell phone, or you've got paper charts. Although tonight we're talking about trying to get rid of those. So, and that's one of my challenges as an instructor, is to make sure that I don't have a lot of extraneous stuff in there. The power issue, that's awesome. That's a great question. I carry a small battery backup and cables to be able to do that. I've used them in flight. I was on a long cross-country flight with my boss one time, and I needed to power up my iPad, and I thought I had it charged. It looked good, but it was a long enough flight and I had other things open on it that were draining some power. So fortunately, I was able to power it back up and continue monitoring as we were flying along. Making it part of your pre-flight checklist is important. I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit, so I won't spoil that one, but that is really important, I think, in my opinion, as an instructor. You're pre-flighting the airplane, you need to pre-flight your EFB, make sure you've got everything you need, and be able to give a good positive answer to all of these questions. And I definitely know that, with students and with clients that, are they comfortable and familiar with its operation? That's why I'm there, to help out. I may not be a power user. I'm still learning. I learn something new every time I use my EFB, and it's something that I do use Foreflight. So I try hard to learn something and do learn something every time I use it. So I encourage my students to do the same thing, and the clients that I work with. And if you're going to be up at altitude trying to use it, trying to learn it, having another pilot along or having an instructor along so that you have somebody that's looking outside and not, you can be a little heads down as you're trying to learn stuff, but do that on the ground first and then take it up into the airplane. We'll talk more about that later. So Phil, I don't want to steal all your thunder, but I think we've got some good things lined up here. So let's get into that.
Yeah, folks, keep all these questions in mind as we go through all these themes, because that's what's going to make you proficient. That's what it's going to make the EFB intuitive to you. It's going to be an absolute electronic extension of your abilities. Let's talk about that checklist. Most of you probably don't know that Foreflight provides an EFB checklist for you. It's a little bit hidden. You got to go look for it, but it's there. It's always been there. So if you go down at the bottom, or if you touch the More button in the lower right and go to Checklist and then scroll all the way to the bottom, you will find an EFB pre-flight checklist. So if you open that up, you will find all sorts of sections that you can go through, such as preparation and pre-flight and then execution and so on and so forth. If you were to click any one of these, you would go through the progression of steps just like you would when you checklist or pre-flight your aircraft. Check, check, good, green, whatever signals you say to yourself, and actually go through that checklist. I would suggest that if you review the checklist that we've provided, it's going to ask you to check a few things that you've never thought about. But Foreflight goes one step further. It gives you the ability to save that checklist and then edit it to your particular situation. So if certain steps don't apply, then remove them. If other steps do apply and they're not included, then add them or change the wording or change the order, whatever works for you. But the point here is become dependent and become very comfortable with a pre-flight checklist on your electronics. Now, I highlighted this one here because it's going to lead us into a feature called PAC that we're going to talk about here momentarily. But we'll get to that, and that is our checklist. But the next step I mentioned was downloads. So we can go to downloads, and you want to make sure that all your data files are up to date. This is the equivalent, the electronic equivalent of making sure that your charts and plates are up to date. Now, Foreflight keeps track of the dates for you. So if you're coming up on a renewal date, or if the renewals are ready for download, we're going to signal you. So in this particular example, you notice you're going in there, and what you want to see is you want to see all green checks on all the charts that you download, and you don't want to see the blue download button at the bottom. Now, if you do see the blue button at the download button at the bottom, don't fear. That simply says that we have new downloads for you to download. So you hit that blue button and you download it in a few seconds in most cases. Sometimes it may take a few minutes depending on the size of the file, the number of files, and the strength or speed of your Wi-Fi. You will be updating your iPad or your iPhone, as may be the case. And by the way, I use the term iPad and iPhone interchangeably here in this discussion because Foreflight over the last couple of years has really what we call parity to these two, that they look and act essentially the same. There's still a few minor differences. We're not going to talk about that, but we've really closed that gap. Now, we've gone one step further here at Foreflight in the last year or two, and we've made the download process automatic if you desire, and such that it can be done in the background when you have Foreflight open. So if that is something you would desire to do, go to Settings in Foreflight, scroll about halfway down, and you will see those background downloads and automatic downloads that you can toggle on. And then while you're busy getting the weather or preparing your flight plan or whatever, Foreflight will be downloading all the necessary files in the background, and you will be good to go when it comes to time for your checklist. PAC is the feature I referenced before. It's exactly what it sounds like. You are going to pack your iPad for your trip. You will see the pack button and get to it in two different places. If you're in the Maps view and you're a flight planner using Maps view and the pop-up window dialog box there, you'll see it as a little suitcase in the lower right. If you plan your flights in Flights view, or if you end up moving your flight over to Flights view because you're going to file a flight plan, we also provide the entry to the PAC feature there as well. Pretty close to the bottom, it's highlighted in green. Now, when you hit that button from either location, you're taken to another dialog window, which is going to ask you, what do you want to pack? I encourage you to pack everything. But if you were to, and just a little helpful hint, if you were to skip anything, I would probably say don't worry about the 3D view imagery. But that's just a personal preference. But I pack it anyway. I pack it all. And if you notice from the map up above, it will show you a corridor that is approximately 25 miles either side of your route, that it's going to pack all relevant information for everything going on in that corridor. So if that corridor were to catch the corner of an adjacent state that you technically don't fly over, but it's next to the flight plan route, we're going to go ahead and pack that state, or at least all the applicable charts for you from that state, because we're covering everything in that corridor. Now, a lot of people say, well, if I'm packing all these files, I don't want them on my iPad. They're going to live there forever. No, don't worry. In a couple days, they will be removed from your iPad after your flight has been completed. After you hit that pack button, it may take a couple seconds or minutes. You'll get the all clear, or at least the all packed in this case, and you will be good to go. And that will give you some comfort that you've got everything ready to go. Now, there's one more tip I want to give you that's just worth mentioning here. Another thing I like to do, personal practice, is I will double click that home button, or on the newer iPads, swipe up and over from the lower left-hand corner, and I will close all the apps that I've got open on my iPad. I don't need mail. I don't need Facebook. I don't need Slack. I don't need my settings. I don't need Instagram open, occupying space and generating background activity while I'm flying. That will not only burn up valuable battery power, but it also could burn up some RAM or memory and cause some problems down the road. We typically are very efficient in the way that memory is utilized, but we're erring on the side of caution here. And I'll go one further tip. So this is a tip plus here, is I personally, before I go fly, I will reboot my iPad to make sure everything is cleared out, and then I will reopen Foreflight. But I'm not going to say that that's a necessary thing, but it's not a bad practice.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Phil. I think that's a really good habit to get into. I know I have been surprised on occasion when I have opened up my iPad and swiped up and seen how many apps I have open. So cleaning those out and then rebooting the iPad is a really good way to make sure that you're actually ready for that flight. And you've got everything packed and ready to go. So good tips. Good tips.
Think of it almost as unnecessary weight that you're carrying with you, and you really don't need to have that weight on board, except it's electronic weight in this case. So we're going to transition into external devices, but before we do you want to take a question or two if any have come in, John?
See if we've got any questions that have come in related to this. Actually, I think our team's been doing a really great job in getting answers out to folks. So I don't think there's anything for us to talk about at the moment in terms of answering a question, but I'm sure there will be.
No problem. No problem. And thanks, team, for being live and on the spot and handling those. Let's talk about external devices. This is kind of fun. As you know, that when you go up there, you've got access to information that a few years ago you never had. And we're going to focus on the Adsb system here, but I will mention a couple other choices that you have. And when we talk about external devices, we're talking about a device that's going to serve as an electronic conduit between your iPad and your iPhone and those services which are feeding information up to you in the air. You've just got to connect the dots and put them all together. There's numerous products out there in the market. First that I want to mention, shout out to Foreflight's Sentry. This is a device we came out with a couple years ago. It is full capacity, handles all the stuff that you need to do to have ADSB, AHRS, GPS location, and even more things. Has a carbon monoxide alarm on it and things like that. If you don't have one, if you're in the market, please give Sentry a look. But there are other choices out there too. Stratus has a very viable and robust device, has for years. Dual, Bad Elf, to name two others that are popular. I actually have some old Dual and Bad Elves myself before the Sentry came around, and there are others as well. But anyway, these are devices which are going to be the electronic conduit between your iPad and the system of information that is out there. Now, what exactly do these things do? Next slide. Well, before I get to that, I forgot, I injected that. Don't forget also, in some cases, you may not need one of those external devices because you may be able to hook your iPad up directly to some of your avionics, and it will provide things like GPS or ADSB in if they have that. So if you have a modern transponder, for example, today, the Garmin 345 is one that comes to mind that's hugely popular. Explore the possibility that you can tie your iPad into that and you can get ADSB in. Now, what are you going to get by doing that? Well, the first thing that comes to mind, obviously, is GPS location. And I know the immediate response probably of most of you out there listening is, well, my iPad gets GPS location. But here we're talking about the quality of the signal and the accuracy of the signal. That little sensor inside that iPad is not very big. It's not very robust. And yes, it works in many, many cases, but maybe it's not the greatest receiver for GPS that you can have. Maybe an external device that's spotted in the window or is not sitting on your knee, buried, 12 inches from a whole bunch of electronics and power and wires. You're getting a better signal by doing that. A lot of those external devices provide AHRS. And why would I want to have AHRS? Well, Foreflight has a feature called synthetic vision, which we're not going to cover here, but I think most of you know what it is, which acts as your artificial horizon, your attitude indicator, things like that, gives you pitch, bank, roll, all sorts of other information graphically on your device, and it really enhances your situational awareness. If you've never seen it, then I encourage you to take a look at our synthetic vision, because I think you'll be pretty enamored with not only the physical presentation, but the amount of information and data it provides to you. But lastly, as I mentioned, as the teaser, was Adsb. We want to explore that a little because, as you know, most of you, there was a 2020 mandate that all airplanes flying in controlled airspace had to be Adsb compliant. But remember, there was a little bit of a detail there. You had to be Adsb out compliant. In other words, you had to be transmitting a signal from your aircraft into the Adsb network that was providing information about your location, your altitude, what your tail number is, relative changes in all those parameters, things like that. That's the out. The in is something that the receivers we're talking about will feed into Foreflight and present you with data that you probably never had available to you before. Here's a map shown on Foreflight of all the Adsb towers in the United States. There are a bunch. I'm trying to think of the number. I should have looked it up. I apologize. I want to say it's 600 and something, but it is a lot of towers and pretty much encompasses the entire continental United States. And if we were to show you Alaska and Hawaii, you'd see similar type coverage up there as well. Now, you're not going to go too many places where you're not going to have coverage. But one thing that people need to remember is that the Adsb towers are not all created equal. Similar to the way VOR stations are, we have low, medium, and high. And most of them, about 2/3 actually, last count, are actually low stations. So what does that mean? Well, the low stations are more local in the amount of information they provide. For example, weather. So if you're looking up and wanting to get radar coverage or icing or turbulence on the Adsb system, if you're connecting or talking to a low tower, you're probably only going to get ad information for maybe 200 or 300 miles around you. Whereas the medium and high will transmit nationwide type information. So it's not an error on your system. Your device isn't working. It is not malfunctioning or anything like that. It may be a function of the kind of tower that you're actually hitting. Now, the good news is the traffic system, what they call the TFIS, is actually available on all these. And we're going to talk about traffic here in a minute. So when you connect up and you're connected to your device and you're getting a feed from the Adsb system, you go to Foreflight. What kind of things do you have? Well, when you go to the map and then you select the map overlay, which is in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see some of the options. The first thing that you're going to notice is it's going to show you the towers that your device sees. And in this case, and just full disclosure by everybody, when I made these slides, I'm sitting here in my office about on the second floor of my house, about 30 feet above the ground. And I happen to have an Adsb tower that's located about 3 miles from my house. So I can actually pick up some signals, weak as it is. I can pick up signals from that tower here sitting in my house, which is a little bit unusual. Most people aren't going to have that luxury. But it shows the tower and where it is. In that case, that's a medium tower. But then we also show other things. We also show the various weather products that are available. And if you notice, there's 3 or 4 of them that show up here. Icing, turbulence, things like that, but they're all going to have as a suffix Adsb. So you're going to know which ones you're going to be getting product and information feeds from when you are up in the air. So I encourage you to give that a look. There's more information on our website about how this all works. We'll come as to where you and how you can access that. But let's quickly move to the traffic, because that's kind of the fun thing and in some ways the most useful. And that is, if there's traffic targets out there that are also part of the system, and if you're in control airspace, at least in theory, everybody is part of the system, then you are going to see those traffic targets with a relative altitude relative to you. You'll see their tail number, and you'll also see the trajectory, the direction that they're flying. And in some cases, as indicated on the lower right target, you'll see up and down arrows if the system is sensing that they are losing or gaining altitude at a significant pace. So give that a look. Now, don't get mesmerized into thinking that every traffic target is going to show up in the Adsb system. Obviously, there are aircraft out there that are not required to transmit out signals because they're in uncontrolled airspace. There could be some out there that are, hate to say it, violators, as well as other aircraft, and gliders come to mind. I fly through a glider area, and there's a lot of gliders. About half the gliders have transponders, the others don't. So you always have to have eyes out the window. John, I'm sure you're chomping at the bit to make a comment about that.
Yeah, you're right. I am. That's one of the things I harp on with folks that I'm flying with. You know, your eyes have to be outside the window. If you're in VFR conditions, if you're flying IFR and you're in VMC, your eyes still have to be out the window. You can't take lots of time and stare inside, whether it's on avionics on the panel or your tablet in your lap or on a yoke. You have to divide your time. You've got to stay outside and look at it. I have a colleague who advocates bringing it up to eye level, and that's not a bad technique. If you're looking at something and you have it up and you'll be able to kind of scan behind it, you can see it. Yeah, it's blocking a little bit, but as you learn to do the scan properly, you'll be able to do it. Just got to keep your eyes outside, though. If I see one of my pilots that I'm flying with their eyes inside, I'm going to say something if I don't see them actively get out and start scanning, because that is really important. And honestly, I don't want to talk about people in my safety seminars. I don't want to have to, talk about people that have been distracted and have had an accident because of that. So keep the scan going. Glance at your tablet, see the information you look for. And this is where I think your earlier point, Phil, comes into play. Be very familiar with it, know how to use it so it's almost intuitive. That takes a lot of practice, and I think it's something that we have to continue to work on. I know it's something I have to work on. I was out of flying for a period of time, and I came back in. We had an explosion in all the GPS equipment and learning all that, and now learning Foreflight and the electronic flight bags, trying to make sure I understand how to use those in a good, efficient manner without a lot of heads down time trying to figure out what I'm looking for. So definitely learn how to use it, and then keep your eyes outside as much as you possibly can so that you're not going to miss something as you're flying around. Yes, you have a lot of information on your iPad, but you still need to look outside and confirm that. Just saying you've got something on the fish finder is not enough. You've got to see that.
That's right. When I was learning to fly, all of us, there were two cardinal rules, or probably more than two. But the two I remember is always fly the airplane. Yep. And second of all, you're always responsible for see and avoid. Now that was VFR flying and all that. And Foreflight doesn't replace those. They complement it. They help you, but it is ultimately the responsibility of the pilot to fly the airplane and to see and avoid. Now, moving on, there are other products out there that are not part of the Adsb. SiriusXM is the primary one. We're not going to talk about it, but I do want to give a shout out to them because that is a very viable product that provides excellent services and all that. If you happen to be interested in being part of the SiriusXM, visit their website. Foreflight has information on our website about it. It takes a different type of device, but they provide excellent information while at altitude. And then also explore the possibility that your Adsb can be obtained through a panel avionics connection, and Foreflight will connect with your panel. It's not a hard thing to do. It's a little bit different, but we can assist you on that if you don't know how to do it, or certainly your avionics people can assist as well.
Well, I think, Phil, one of the things that I do as an instructor, I'm bouncing around from aircraft to aircraft to aircraft, and we have a lot of people who use the airplanes, and so trying to get in there and connect up every time, I just take my Stratus with me, or and Sentry, I think is what I've got. Yep. And I use that. I just put it in every airplane I go into. I've got it. I know how to use it. It connects up. I don't have to worry about that. But it would be good if you're going to be in an airplane on a very regular basis to learn how to connect with the equipment in the plane, so that you've got it on your flight bag.
That's right. And practicing the connection inside the airplane is something you can do at the hangar.
Yeah.
Making sure that everything's connected, you're getting the signals. If you want to include your Sentry or Stratus as part of that exercise as well, that's the time and place to do it.
Yep.
It's not costing you anything other than a little time, and it will save a lot of heartaches later. So we're going to transition into part 3, in-flight tools. I don't know if we have any questions you want to address, or just keep rolling.
Let me take a quick look here. Find my cursor. There we go. Let's see what we've got. Well, here's a good question. I don't know that we have a good answer for it, but I'll ask it. What do we do when Canada goes to the space-based Adsb system, since our implementation is ground-based? Is that going to be an issue for us? It's a good question. I don't know that I have an answer.
It is an excellent question. And I know that Canada has an Adsb system, and actually I think some of it's been implemented in some areas. I don't know how widespread it is. I don't have a good answer for that. And because I haven't visited that topic or been briefed on it lately. But what I would recommend is whoever is interested in that, give us a ring. I say reach out to us at Foreflight, and I'll give you the way to do it in case people don't know. And it will be at the end, is email us at team@foreflight.com, and we will be more than happy to investigate and let you know a little about that.
A couple other questions have come in here. Can I plug an EFB into the panel to use the aircraft electric power instead of operating on its own battery power during flight?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Make sure you have the right connection. You might have to make sure that you have an adapter for that, for lack of better words, cigarette lighter type attachment that a lot of people have. And the older airplanes, some of the newer ones actually have USB ports, because the power being fed to that may be a little bit on the slow side. And there may be the proper adapter and or a visit with your avionics or your mechanic might be able to, without undertaking a lot of time and expense, be able to feed the power up, increase the power to your supply. But that is definitely something you want to check out on the ground and practice to make sure you can properly charge your device. And that is a very acceptable solution to addressing the, how is my iPad going to become powered and stay powered throughout my flight?
I have another question here from James. Have not flown since the 80s and want to return, but want to learn EFBs on a desktop simulator. Can Foreflight be tied to a desktop simulator in order to learn how it works? And can you recommend a specific tablet configuration to ensure a good, fast operation?
I'm not a simulator guy, but the answer to your question is yes. Foreflight interacts with a whole bunch of simulator products. I believe we have information on our website as to that. Those that work, all the popular ones I know do, because I see chatter about it. And if you have any questions, again, write us at team@foreflight.com. And I can assure you, we have people on our pilot support team, actually throughout the organization, that are real sim junkies and would love to share the knowledge about how to hook it up with a sim and practice, and not only practice your flying skill, but practice your flying skill using your iPad as a tool.
Yeah, and just a clarification on the Sirius XM aviation products, those are satellite based, so you're able to get them anywhere on the ground. You're not limited by the line of sight. So if Phil had a mountain or a ridge between him and the tower nearby, he may not get that information. But if you're using Sirius XM, you will have access to it. So I know a lot of folks that fly in mountainous areas but really like to have that, and it gives them the good data that they need while they're in there. And it is a little bit clearer than the Adsb stuff from the ground too. So there's some benefits to it. I would suggest taking a look at both, and you can run both. There's no reason why you can't. So take a look at that and do that. Oh, just a reminder, Phil, what's the gesture for clearing your all the open apps on your iPad up from the left?
Well, on the newer ones, the older devices that have the home button that you press, the little button on one end, double press that, then they will all appear as small displays or smaller icons on the screen, and you just swipe up to remove them. On the newer iPads, then you pretty much have to swipe. It takes a little practice, but you swipe kind of over to the right and up at the same time from the lower left-hand corner.
Okay. You have a specific question here about the GTX 345, and then we'll move on to the next section. Michael's looking to buy one, and he wants to know, can it hook to Foreflight? I think the answer there is yes. Does he need anything special to make it work?
No, it'll recognize it. It will actually connect up with that. The 345 basically creates a signal, and Foreflight will actually find it as a device, as long as your avionics people have it hooked up when they install the GTX 345. This is not a do-it-yourself type project unless you're a licensed avionics type person, and they can probably help you get it hooked up.
All right, let's move on to the next section.
Okay, gladly. We're going to talk about some of the in-flight tools that Foreflight has that's going to help you with your electronic flight bag and the quest to eliminate paper and all that. And here is probably number one that if you want to do, and that's the use of the scratch pad. The scratch pad has been around Foreflight for a very long time. And this is just a simple screenshot of a whole bunch of scratch pads that I happen to have on my iPad because I didn't clean it up, because I want to preserve those scratch pads for the record. And I'm not exactly sure why. Sometimes there's a need, or I maybe made notes or anything like that. So they are there. But to create a scratch pad, you go to that plus button in the upper right-hand corner. You tap that, you'll get a pop-up window. And Foreflight has provided 9 templates for you to select from. Now, obviously, one of them is just a blank screen if you want. But if you're getting ready to copy clearance and you want the kind of the craft scratch pad, we have that there. If you want to copy down your weather, we have a weather one. If you want to type, we have one that you can type in using text. We have all sorts of things. If you want to issue a PIREP, we have a blank form for a PIREP, so on and so forth. So give scratch pads a look. I think most of you probably have already explored this and determined this is useful. It's not, how am I going to use this kind of thing. And you can just take your finger and scribble, or if you have an Apple Pencil or a pen that's got the little rubber tip on the end, whatever it takes. It isn't always pretty. Mine are not pretty at all. You know what? They're functional, and that's the important thing. And they're replacing paper, and they're all in one place. And if you happen to open your window, it's not blowing all over the cockpit. Next is plates. Now, this has undergone a pretty massive overhaul about 1.5 years or 2 years ago by Foreflight. For those of you that are longtime Foreflight users, you remember probably our old plates. We really enhanced it with what I'm going to call Plates 2.0. It was pretty much an overhaul of the way it was displayed as well as the way it functions. Now, there's several features here I want to point out to you. The first one is the concept of flight binders. And these are binders that you create. And the ones that are highlighted there with the red box are ones that I have created before I made this slide that are applicable to a certain flight. You see the departure airport, you see the destination airport. Well, all the plates associated with that flight are all contained right there. And it's just a matter of tapping that flight and then tapping which plate I want to see, such as an airport diagram or an approach plate or a departure procedure or whatever, and that plate will instantly appear. Now, then the next section down below are other binders, and these were binders that I created before we rolled out Plates 2.0. And in my case, I like to organize all the plates by airport. So if I'm flying to College Station, Texas, which is KCLL, then I have all the plates available to me at College Station by merely tapping KCLL, and poof, they're there, and I can select which one. Do I want the ILS 14? Do I want the back course 16? or do I want an airport diagram or an RNAV or whatever? They're all there located. That's something that you plan and you organize before you take off. And especially if you're more of the recreational type flyer, you're probably frequenting a small number of airports. And by small, I mean, I could be talking anywhere from 2 to, let's say, 10 or 15 or 20. That's probably where you're doing most of your stopping. So with a little effort up front, you can organize them, and they're always there for your easy access using the binders. Now, the third one, and this is where we really took our plates feature to the next level, is adding a plate binder, or a flight binder in this case. We made Foreflight smart. Foreflight was already smart, but we made it smarter so that when you tap that, you're going to get a pop-up and it's going to say, oh, I see you have active flight plans in a couple different locations. Notice it's asking you if you want to add a flight binder for the flight that you currently have in the maps view. And I think everybody's available in the maps view or familiar with the maps view. There's only one flight plan you can have in there at a time in that pop-up window. And in this case, I have a flight from David Wayne Hooks to Lubbock, Texas. Excuse me. It also takes a look in the flights view to see if you have any upcoming future flights based on estimated time of departure in the flights view. Now, you could have multiple flights in the flights view. So if that's the case, it will list them all. So it is asking you which flight you want to add a binder to. And as soon as you tap one of those, you'll move to the next step and it will create that binder for you. And right there, I have my flight from David Wayne Hooks to Lubbock, Texas, which was the flight that was in maps. And notice it is anticipating, based on my flight plan, what charts I want to see. It's got the airport diagrams for both of them, and it's got an approach plate already loaded up because I had loaded a procedure into Lubbock. Notice also, when I don't show it, there's a departure procedure for David Wayne Hooks because it has the number 1. Now, let's just say I wanted to change the approach procedure or I didn't have one. All you had to do is tap that. You would be presented with a selection table of all the approach procedures for Lubbock, and then you would select the one that you want. So that's an easy step to pull up a plate that you may not already have loaded into the binder. And it's also an easy step to change the procedure. Say you wanted to line up for the RNAV, but you decide you want to go ahead and shoot the ILS. You just simply go to there and you can change the presentation of the plates. Now, one thing I don't have on the slides, but please notice, people say, well, how do I get my plate real quick? I don't want it on the map, but I want to toggle back and forth. If I were to take my finger and simply touch maps down on the bottom, one touch, instantly I'm in maps view. One touch on plates, I'm instantly back to plates view. So it's very quick, easy, and intuitive on how to move from one presentation to the other.
If you're not, got a good question, if you don't mind. Yeah. Where to go? Okay, here we are. What's the difference between pack and binder? I mean, doesn't pack make sure you have all of the plates that you need for your trip, and even have some of the old stuff in there? I mean, if you're flying recent, I mean, within the last couple of days, I guess. And then second question, kind of a corollary to that, if you have stuff in a binder, does it update when there are updates made to those plates? Good
question. Let's address the first one about the difference between pack and a binder. Pack is packing for a flight. The thing you want to remember is you want to get all available information before you disconnect from the Wi-Fi. So if you don't have information such as the applicable charts and plates, they will put them on your iPad so that they can be used when you're disconnected. It also will update the latest weather, fuel prices, NOTAMs, things like that. It literally can change from minute to minute. Now, that doesn't mean another NOTAM or some weather can change when you're en route and you're at altitude, but at least you got the last thing you had available to you before you disconnect to the Wi-Fi, which is probably about the time when you disconnect from the hangar or leave the hangar. Now, binders are a way that you organize your charts, your plates, your products for easy reference and easy access. So your plates, for example, are not going to be available if you didn't download that state or pack firsthand before you started. Okay, so let's just say this example I have here is not a good example, but let's say I was flying from Texas to Kansas. Well, I have to overfly Oklahoma. If I don't select Oklahoma for download before I make my flight and I get into the air, and if I didn't pack, and all of a sudden I have to make a landing or divert to an airport in, let's say, Oklahoma City that I wasn't planning on, I wouldn't have any plates or any products for Oklahoma unless I packed. And then packing would have those for you as long as you're not diverting outside of that corridor. Now, keep in mind, different things are going to apply to that corridor. We're not just getting plates within that corridor. If all plates in Oklahoma are in one file, then you'll have the whole thing. Whereas organizing your plate binders and things like that, you may organize them by airport or by trip or possible diversion airports and make them more readily accessible, but they're already on your iPad. Now, the second question, do these products update when we have a new data cycle? The answer is yes. You don't have to redo your binders. You don't have to check in all the expiration. If there is a new plate that comes out in one of your binders, it will be updated the next time you update your at a data cycle turnover.
Okay. And you can alphabetize those, correct?
I'm glad somebody asked that.
Yeah, that was a good question. Just one follow-up on binders. You can alphabetize those, correct? You don't have to keep them the way you've created them. You can move them around and put them in an order.
I believe you can. I haven't checked that lately, but I believe you can.
Okay. All right.
You pretty much organize them and call them anything you want.
Good.
Okay. So if you didn't like the 4-letter designation and you wanted to call it College Station, you could put in there College Station. You're able to give it a name or a title. Now, the next picture I want to briefly show is Hazard Advisor. Now, this is pretty simplistic in what I'm demonstrating here because, like I said, I'm in my office. But you turn on the Hazard Advisor, and this is a ground proximity overlay. It's a good thing to have, especially if you're flying in terrain or you're flying close to the ground, because it's going to light up when you get within a certain distance of the ground. In this case, like I said earlier, I'm 20 feet off the ground, so it turns red, and that red gets my attention, and I think it would probably get everybody else's. As you get further away from the ground, you'll transition from yellow, and then you'll have green. Okay, the towers are also always there, so you should give this a try if you are relatively low, if you think that dodging or maintaining proper separation with aerials and towers and maybe ground and hills, if you're in mountainous or areas that have terrain, I would certainly give Hazard Advisor a look. It's well worth it. The next feature I want to talk about is Breadcrumbs. This was introduced a couple years ago. I think everybody knows what Breadcrumbs is. It's basically you are tracking where you've been. It's a feature you have to turn on. You turn it on from within settings in map view as demonstrated here. Just toggle it on and then you'll get that nice green line that shows where you've been. And it's kind of fun, but it also has a useful purpose. You can do a post-flight debrief to see where you've been. You can do an in-flight debrief. And by that, I mean, where have I been? I was trying to fly a certain route. How close to it was I? A good example of that is and maybe I bet you we have some people listening in that are part of a search and rescue organization. This is tremendously useful to them because they are oftentimes out flying grids or patterns, and they want to know where they were relative to the grid. And maybe did they miss a segment or miss a corner or something like that. So this is very, very, very helpful for them. Marked positions is one of my favorite. This came out just a year or two ago. And this is not only fun, but very, very useful as well. We've always had the ability to basically take your finger and just kind of press on a location and hope that your finger didn't kind of jiggle and you didn't move over half a mile to the east or something like that and kind of save a position. Well, we've now introduced an icon that looks like an inverted teardrop on the left-hand side that you can mark your position with. So when you tap that, it will pop up a dialog box for that position that you were at exactly the time that you hit that icon. And you can save that instantly. You have the option of giving it a name, which I quickly, if you plan on doing a lot of these, I would probably give it a name. You can also add notes. And if you noticed from that box, it time-stamped it. It gave you the lat long. It gave you the altitude, gave you your speed, all that kind of thing. And so it will preserve for the record what you were doing and where you were when you passed that. Now, most of the time, people are just interested in the lat long, but it gives you more information as well. Now, you can do other things with these marked positions. And when you do it, notice you get kind of a lime neon green inverted teardrop there on your map. Now, it'll stay there, and you can mark as many positions as you want. This particular one, I happen to just call home. That's where I live. But once you get those out there, you can do different things with them. You can save those as a user waypoint and then add them to your user waypoint files, which some people do. Especially can imagine people that fly pipelines or are doing some type of surveying from the air, and they need to know where things are or that they see or make notes about them. Marked position goes a long ways to solving that objective without scribbling notes and adding to more paper. The marked positions are automatically included within the track log, and we're going to transition to the track log here in a minute, or you can just let it stay as a marked position. So if you haven't explored the marked position, give it a look. It's very powerful. We're going to move into the post-flight debrief, start with the track logs, but before, are there any questions you want to address, John, or just keep rolling?
Let's keep rolling. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour here, and I know we still have a lot more information to get out there. So once we're done with all that, we'll go back and get some of these questions. Did have one question I do think needs to be addressed right now, though. Are some of these features only available on some of the more advanced versions of Foreflight? I know there are different subscription levels. So are there some that are only available at maybe the Pro Plus level, or are they available across all?
No, that's a good question, and I'm glad you pointed it out. And the answer is yes. Some of these features are only available at the Performance Plus level. Some are at Pro Plus and Performance Plus. We have a list on our website. If you go to foreflight.com, I think it's /buy, you can actually see a checklist that has all the features contained in a marked positions, I believe is a Performance Plus feature only. Some of the other ones we talked about, I think, are available for all subscription levels.
Okay, thank you.
So take a look at that, and that helps you obtain the proper subscription level to the features that you want to see and to use, and adjust accordingly. So with that, let's look at track log. Track logs are fun, they're useful, but they're also very informative. And those breadcrumbs basically become a track log, which becomes a record of where you've been. And it's more than just a blue line on the map as, oh, I left here and went northwest and went to College Station, then went southeast, blah, blah, blah. It used to be that way, as depicted in the upper top, but it's evolved into a lot more because Foreflight has added a vertical profile component to it, as you can see at the bottom. So now you have a depiction of what your altitude was, and we've also added a speed display as well, so you can see what your speed was and toggle it. But we're not done with that. If you notice, and this is where it gets kind of fun, you can play it. So if you press that play button there, you can actually follow the flight and replay the flight along with descriptions, and your cursor becomes an airplane, and you can see where you are on the profile view. Now, this is just a snapshot of one point during that flight, but if I wanted to make a movie for the purposes of this presentation, we could watch that entire flight, and it would show you how fast, how high, what I was doing, where I was, all that kind of thing.
This is an instructor's friend.
Absolutely. Let's go one step further. Now, for those of you that have Performance Plus, you're probably familiar with our 3D feature. Touch 3D, and that track log will become a 3D profile. This is a snapshot of it. You can see the blue curtain, and now you can play your track log in 3D version, in 3D viewer, and replay the flight and actually see the ground, see yourself coming up on the airport, all the things that you would have seen if you were looking out the window. Very fun, very knowledgeable, helps you debrief. One thing worth noting that I did not put on the slides, track logs can be exported to Google Earth. So if you want to view them on Google Earth, which gives you a completely different look than what Foreflight provides, have at it, give that a look. It's actually a lot of fun. You mentioned, John, just a comment about helping students debrief. The use of track log is an excellent way to review a flight and to see what you did and to recall things that maybe didn't go quite so well, such as altitudes on approach or things like that. So with that, and this is the last thing we're going to really talk about, is flight plan retention. I hear this from business customers a lot. I'm sure the general aviation community is the same way. You know, how long are flight plans? How long do they stay on my iPad? We retain all that information indefinitely until such time as you take an action to get rid of it. So don't remove it. If you feel compelled or the urge to do some housekeeping, have at it. Just know that that removal of a flight plan or of a flight is done at your own decision. It's not done by us. We don't require our customers to do that. But I want you also to take consideration that there may be times where it's good to keep that flight plan on file and maybe even go one step further and attach documents and files to it. We give you that capability. So if you have things like a weight and balance that you want to retain, maybe even some pictures, a spreadsheet, anything else, then you can attach that file to your flight plan by use of the icon. In flights, you will see that you just simply tap that. Right there, it says 0 files. You will add that. Those files that you want to attach, we take Word documents, we take PDF files, we take pictures, JPEGs, all sorts of files where there's a wide variety of files that can be attached, and then it becomes a permanent attachment to that flight plan. Now, that's a feature I believe that's only available with Performance Plus. It may be available with Pro Plus. Take a look. But if this is something that is attractive to you and say, oh, I didn't know about that, that's something I could use, then give that a look. And the last thing I want to mention, if you can go back to the previous slide, is that we have, well, two things. We've made it easy. There you go. Just stay there, Jay. We don't talk about electronic logbook, but Foreflight has an electronic logbook feature that is contained within the app, and you have the ability to attach files, pictures, all sorts of information to your logbook entry, in addition to the basic things like how long did I fly? How many takeoffs did I have? How many landings? How many were at day? How many were at night? We go way beyond the basics for your logbook entry. So give that a look and discover how you can file attachments, how you can get electronic endorsements from your CFI. John, you've probably electronically signed a few logbooks in your day. So it works quite well and becomes a matter of the electronic record.
One quick question for you, Phil, before we move on. Somebody wanted to know, can you import a track from another tracking source?
Yes, if it's a Stratus or a Sentry and it was recorded on that.
Okay.
But if someone else had a track log, unless it's changed recently, if someone else has a track log and you want to import it, you can't do that. Now you can import it. They can export it to you and you can view it on Google Earth, but not within Foreflight.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Just I'll prompt everybody that's listening or the listener that may have asked that question. The secret there is you want to get a hold of the KML file, which is a type of file, and then you can do things with that.
Right.
Okay, this slide, I only want to draw attention. I think this is the last one. That up in the upper right-hand corner is one of my favorite icons in all of Foreflight. That's the box with the arrow out of it, and that is what we call the Send To button. Foreflight will anticipate when you're almost anywhere in Foreflight, if that button appears, they are anticipating that you want to do something with what you're looking at, such as send it somewhere else or send it to somebody else, and it's going to anticipate how you want to do that. You see there's AirDrop, messaging, mail, Slack, all sorts of options, but the one I highlighted is that we have made it easy for you to attach that to a flight. So in this case, here's a scratch pad, and I want to send that to my flight as an attachment. And so we made it easy for you to do that. And then that scratch pad will become a permanent part of that flight plan. So give that a try, experiment with that at home. And with that, that's our presentation. I want to draw reference to 3 resources that I want to remind everybody. I think most of our listeners know about it. Our exhaustive video library. It's well over 200 videos, and it grows literally every week. That's your website. These are all available on foreflight.com/videos in the case of videos. Our support library, where we have pilots guides and user guides, as well as knowledge-based articles, will be in /support. If you want to see what all has happened with every release that we've had going back to the beginning of Foreflight, you can go to foreflight.com/releases. But probably the best resource of all is the group that I'm part of and I'm the most proud of, and that's my pilot support team and all the colleagues, many of which are answering your questions as we do this presentation live. Once again, I forgot to get an exact number, but I'm going to guess there's about 30 of us. We're all real people. We're scattered out through the United States. No, well, I'll go one step further. We actually have people scattered across the globe now. We have agents in Canada. We have agents in Mexico. We have one in Australia. We have one in New Zealand. We have several in Europe. So it's not just a US-based operation. We man the pilot support team. Our purpose in life at Foreflight is to help our customers out. We are real people. We're all pilots, and we love helping people. So please, if you get hung up, if you need information, if you have a problem, don't know how to do something, where do I go to learn how to do this? Oh, maybe something's not working right with Foreflight. Surprise, surprise. We are a product built by humans. We do have bugs on periodically, and we work very hard to eradicate those bugs. But sometimes we hear about them from our customers. Let us know. We want to know how you're doing. We're here to help your experience. So with that, John, I'm ready to launch off into some questions.
Okay, we have a few more that have come in. Here's a good one. Harry wants to know, is there a delay between sync for the iPhone and the iPad when using Foreflight?
Excellent question, Harry. And in theory, there should not be much of a delay at all. And by much, I say not more than a couple seconds. But there are factors that go into play. It could be a function of the Wi-Fi connections you have with both your iPad and your iPhone. So if you make a change on one, how long will it be reflected on the other? Occasionally, you have to help it out by maybe asking it to refresh by swiping something up and causing a little spinning clock to start activating. No different than you would with any other app. And sync is a very, very difficult feature from a technology standpoint to pull off. And we have a lot of very high-powered programmers and coders and data engineers and all that work on sync, constantly trying to improve the sync process. I couldn't tell you the first thing about how it works under the hood, but they are experts in this, and it's not easily done. And because there's so many factors involved. So be patient with it. Sometimes you need to, if you struggle, sometimes I would suggest that you force close the app and then reopen it like we discussed before. On occasion, if that doesn't work, I can suggest you might sign out and sign back in, because anytime you sign into the app, it will force your device to communicate with our servers, and it will get the latest update. Very rarely do you have to ever delete the app and reinstall it from the Apple App Store, but that is done on occasion. Before you do that, it's probably a good idea to reach out to us at team@foreflight.com, and we can help you troubleshoot your sync issues.
Okay. Another question here, it goes back to the discussion on binders and when there's a plate update. Is there something in there that notifies you that a particular plate has been updated, or is that just it's been updated because the update sequence has occurred?
Yeah, it's the latter. We don't notify you plate by plate or map by map or anything like that. You just know from the upload experience and the effective dates of your products. You know, it's a good idea to go in there periodically. I mentioned looking for the green checks. That's the start, but I always take a look at the effective dates and see that I'm in the middle of the effective date. And then, of course, when you get close to the expiration of that time period for when those data products are valid, you're going to actually have two in there. You're going to have the current one and then the one that you've downloaded that will become active on the changeover date.
Okay. Just looking to see if we have any others in here. Going back to when we were talking about plugging into ship's power for powering the iPad, there was a comment that it's not the lighter plug that is the limitation, but rather what adapter you plug into the lighter. And so the recommendation is that you need a 2.4 amp minimum connection there, adapter there to get adequate power into the iPad. So thanks,
Okay.
Alan, for that.
Yeah, that's great feedback, and I've heard that before. So if you are using an adapter, it's not worth. You'll probably become very frustrated if you go out and get a cheap one. I think Alan's suggestion is an excellent one. Look at the amperage that adapter provides, and make sure it's adequate for what you're trying to plug into it. And how many? If you and your co-pilot are both planning on plugging in iPads at the same time, that may have an effect on it.
Here's another question. Devin wants to know, is there a way to see an ATC assigned routing after filing an IFR flight plan? Jason Schappert mentioned this ability to see it on Flight Aware. Is that something that's in Foreflight as well?
Yeah, you'll get, when you get the, file your flight plan, you file it from the flights portal, and you will actually, you will have your filed route in there. It will be labeled as filed. If you are given a different route that ATC calls an expected route, you will be presented with the expected route as well, in addition to the filed route. And you will be asked if you want to make the expected route the active route in the viewer, so that you can kind of plan for that. Now, that's all doable from within flights, and you will see all that, and you can select which one. I say that, and I want to be careful that people don't construe that an expected route is your cleared route. It is not. It is a route that is probably a greater likelihood that you'll be cleared as, but ATC, until you get your clearance, you are to assume that that is the route you will fly, but that's no guarantee. Now on that, and we have people here manning the station here, if you have questions, and we didn't talk about filing, electronic filing, which can be done from the cockpit, as long as you're connected to Wi-Fi with your phone or your iPad. But again, the team at foreflight.com, little plug for our flight operations team here at Foreflight. We have a staff of probably at least 10 or 12 individuals that are all filing experts worldwide. And many of them are licensed dispatchers. I think we have a gentleman that is a former ATC controller and things like that. So we have a big knowledge base on all things flying. So if you have any questions about specifics, or you get flight plans or filing clearances that don't make sense, or you don't know how you got them or why you got them and things like that, shoot us a line. We're here to clear out the fog a little bit on those issues and try to make it, clear in a million on understanding how filing works.
Okay, I've got two more questions, then we're going to end the webinar. We've got a lot of great questions, and just a reminder, if we didn't answer your question, please send it to team@foreflight.com. Christopher wants to know, he said he thought he remembered a setting to automatically initiate recording a track log. Is there one, or do I have to push record every time?
No, there is. That's a great question, Christopher. If you go to settings and you scroll down to, I don't know, Jay, if you want to try to switch over to my iPad, if we can do that real quick on the fly or not. Oh, he's good. And shout out to Jay, our producer in the studio that's helping me with this. If you go to settings and you scroll about halfway down, and there will be a section called track logs. right there in the middle. Enable start stop control and enable auto start stop. You want to toggle those on. And so what's happening then is that Foreflight, when you toggle those on, is going to work hard to try to sense the reality of you actually taking off. And it's always going to be sort of recording in the background, but then when you actually take off, it will figure out that, hey, I'm actually on a flight, and it will automatically turn the track log on. So for those of you that are seasoned Foreflighters and have done this feature before, you may notice that when the track log starts, it's already at the 10 or 11 or 15-minute mark. And you're saying, wait a minute, I just took off. Why am I 15 minutes into it? It's because it's always been recording silently in the background, but it just figured out you really are flying as opposed to, say, pulling out of your driveway. Now, how does it do it? It's because Foreflight is smart. It knows that it's in an airport environment. It notices, like the runway, it notices that you're accelerating at a certain speed. And once you reach a certain speed, if there's a corresponding altitude change, like you're gaining altitude, it's pretty easy. It says, you know what? I think I'm flying. I'm turning on the track log. So that's how you do it. Now, if something happens and it does not turn on automatically for one reason or another, you can go down and tap that button and force start the track log. But that's how you set it up to do that.
Okay. All right. And if you don't see that in your settings, is that something maybe you should contact the team about?
Yeah, absolutely. Reach out, or if it doesn't work properly or whatever, reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to help you troubleshoot that feature.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, we'll leave that slide up for just a moment. I'm going to talk a little bit here. I'll switch screens, but we do want to give you the information on how you can get your AOPA Pilot Passport badge. Before we do that, though, big shout out. First of all, thank you, Phil. Great presentation, a lot of good information, a lot of refresher information for me, and some new stuff too. Like I said, I'm always learning when I use Foreflight every single time, so this has been great. And I do want to give a shout out by name, first name only, but to our team that's been helping us behind the scenes. These gentlemen and ladies have been doing a really great job of doing this. So Alex and Jay, Kira, Marlon, let me scroll down here, Rachel, Rob, Sam, and Tim. And then over here on ASI, my colleague Paul. Thank you all for the support behind the scenes, really appreciate that. And let me go ahead and switch over to my screen. And there we go. All right, excellent. So here on the screen, if you're a user of the AOPA Pilot Passport app, you can go to that app just on your phone. If you need to get it from the App Store, go ahead and download it. But you can see there are two areas where you can get into it. We have a quick launch button. That's icon number 1. And then if you want to do it the traditional way, go up to number 2 and tap on the menu there. You'll see Pilot Passport open up. And then number 3, tap on My Pilot Passport. That will open up the next panel, which is My Points and Badges. Go down to the bottom of that screen where you see Redeem Affiliate Code, and that is item number 4. Tap on that. That opens up that last screen for redeeming the code, where it's showing number 5. Tap in the code that's in bold on the screen right there, ASIWEB 021722. Again, that's ASIWEB 021722. That code is available until February 28th, and then it will not be valid after that. So make sure you go in and get that before the end of the month, and then you'll get the webinar badge and the 1,000 points to go along with that. Let me get over on that slide, and there we go. Now, I talked about adding this webinar to your ASI transcript, and you can do that by going to this web link here. It's a bit.ly link, bit.ly-fdtech1 cert, and that will take you to your ASI transcript. If you have an ASI web account already, you don't have to be a member, but you do need to have an AOPA web account. That will take you in there. You can sign in, and then you'll see that added in there. Also, like I mentioned before, this webinar is available for Wings credit. If you signed up with your Wings email that you use to register at FAAsafety.gov, you'll automatically get the credit. If you are not sure, go ahead and send it to us in the comments or in the questions. We'll be able to get that and match it up, make sure we get the right email in there so you get the credit. If you have any further questions or comments or concerns, you can always get a hold of me at john.collins, that's john.collins @aopa.org. I'm happy to answer your questions. And finally, on behalf of all of us here at ASI and at Foreflight, thank you for watching and fly safe. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.